investigation in terms of a woman dying. She was my friend. She was my friend. We were a very, very, well-oiled crew shooting a film together, and then this horrible event happened.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back. I loved hearing from everyone in the past week. As always, I love hearing from all you folks. Today's going to be a great episode. We're going to talk about Alec Baldwin and this criminal case against him. He is guilty. I'm going to come out and say it, darn it. I think he screwed up. I think his negligence caused this poor lady's death on film set in October of 2021. And I think he should either plead guilty to manslaughter or, there should be a trial. And I think a jury would find him guilty of manslaughter. And that's just based on the facts. I don't care about his, politics and this, that, whatever it is. He made some serious mistakes here. And I'm going to walk you through that. And there's a lot of judicial proceedings and how it all leads up to this. So in this particular case, he was an actor, the main actor in this movie, and he was a producer. The producer part is very important because a lot of times people say, well, he was just an actor and he was told this gun that he had was cold, meaning like it didn't have any live rounds in it. So that's it. Like he should be, dismissed from liability for that. No, he was a producer. And during this, like the decisions he made as a producer was very bad. All right. Okay. So this movie had a budget of about $7 million. He put up a lot of the money and he was a producer, like I said. So as that, he had a lot of decisions in who got hired for the job and who didn't. And I think one of the biggest mistakes is they hired an armorer named Hannah Gutierrez Reed. Okay. So Hannah was the armorer. She was 24 years old at the time, which, that's not a big deal. I'm just she was pretty young. And this was only her second time doing this. She had no formal weapons training. So she was the weapons expert on the set without any formal weapons training. And she was never in the police or in the military, so she didn't get training that way. And she didn't even have a union card for this particular job. So, all of that right there is some bad signs. This isn't someone you should hire to be the expert. And sure enough, she made all these big mistakes that you'll understand in a minute. I hate when people's phone goes off during. Okay. All right. Now, then, as I mentioned, she was inexperienced, and this was only her second movie that she was an armorer. The first time she did this, did you know? I didn't know this when we did a previous podcast about this about almost 2 years ago. The first time she was an armorer, Zeke, there was an accidental discharge of a gun in that movie. Kind of a funny story. In that other movie, her first movie, where she was an armorer, there was an accidental discharge, and of all people, Nicolas Cage walked off the set because he was an actor in that particular movie. So Alec Baldwin agreeing to hiring her was a big mistake, to cut corners. That she did it, maybe cheaper than a more experienced armor would do it. In addition, Alec Baldwin hired her to be the armorer and a prop master, meaning that she was also in charge of all the props in the movie. That is usually a whole job in itself. So they hired her to do both the armorer and the prop master. So why would they do that? They had a low budget. $7 million in the Hollywood scheme of things is a very low budget. So they were doing everything they could to keep things within that budget. But one thing you should never skimp on, exactly, safety. All right. Either you don't do this type of thing or you make sure the safety is done very, very correctly. And with her inexperience, so what happened was on the day of the shooting, October 21, Alec Baldwin wanted to rehearse this scene where he grabs a Colt 45, or his character, he grabs a Colt 45 out of his jacket and he shoots it. And in there, he wanted to rehearse it. And God, what a jerk! He wanted to do it during lunch. Okay, it's like, come on, man. You know what we should do during lunch, Zeke? Have lunch. The heck, dude. Okay, so that right, it was bad. Anyway, okay. So he wants to rehearse a scene that he's going to, they're going to film later. And in that, he asks, for a gun, and he gets it from an assistant director named David Halls, okay? And that is another violation. You're supposed to only get weapons directly from the armorer, okay? That's kind of a movie standard. That's why you hire one, all right? But again, like I said, she had other roles. So he got it from this assistant director. And the assistant director said, this is a cold gun, meaning it doesn't have any live rounds, but it did. Maybe if they had a better armorer, or if he only got the weapons from the armorer, which is what he's supposed to do. So like I said before, the theory of manslaughter is that you just made so many mistakes and you were so reckless and you caused somebody's death, even though he didn't want this to happen. He didn't intend to kill the poor lady, right? It's kind of like the most popular example of a manslaughter is like a drinking and driving. If someone's drinking and driving and then they hit somebody and kill them. They didn't intend to kill him, but they're so reckless by drinking and driving that it caused that person's death. Okay. Now, this guy, David Halls, the assistant director. So get this. 2 years prior, Mateo, this David Halls character was involved in a movie, and he himself accidentally discharged a gun and it injured a crew member. Can you believe that? You would think that you're going to learn something out of this. You know what I'm saying? Like, right? Gosh, like I ran out of gas like once in my life when I was driving, and you would think I learned from it, but it happened a second time, like years later. Zeke, how many times you run out of gas? 3? Oh my God, you got me beat by one time. Anyway, but when you shoot somebody on accident, a crew member, that is a one and done deal. That should never happen again, right? So this director himself has made this error, and he was charged with manslaughter, and he pleaded guilty to manslaughter, because he is guilty, just like Alec Baldwin is, damn it. So anyway, it was this director of all people that Alec Baldwin trusted in this, it's a cold gun. And Alec Baldwin knew about this. Like he knows the guy, they're buddies, they've, worked together. All right. Now, there's a lot more. On the day when the filming was supposed to start was October 4. So get this, the crew started complaining. This is about 2 weeks before the killing. 2 weeks before, the crew started complaining, and they were complaining about working conditions. And what they complained about were things like, because this was done in kind of a remote part of the state, because it was like a Western kind of thing, and they were complaining that they didn't have a nearby place to sleep. So they would have to drive a long way to the set and back home. And then the next morning, they have to meet at like 6 a.m. So they were complaining that they weren't getting enough sleep, that everything was going to be very difficult, and that safety might be a problem, among other things. So they were complaining about all of that. But nonetheless, they kind of somehow subsided that, and they got the filming going. Then, all right, I'm going to say this is the inescapable evidence here. On this set, Mateo, on this exact set where somebody was killed before October 21, the day that the Alec Baldwin shot, there was 3 accidental firings of a gun in this set. All right. So what does that tell you? Like, should he have kept going? Something was going wrong. Okay, there was 3 accidental firings, and it was so bad that the camera crew resigned. All right. And one gentleman, Lane Looper, he wrote a resignation letter saying that he cannot be involved in this movie anymore because it's so dangerous, right? I mean, 3 accidental discharge. Have you ever been anywhere, Zeke, Mateo, where somebody accidentally fired a gun in your whole life? Okay, imagine 3 of those and you still keep filming, right? Something's going on. So they, and by the way, if a camera assistant, right, like a cameraman, he resigns from an Alec Baldwin movie, that's a pretty big deal, right? He may not get a job again. Like, do you know what I'm saying? You know how hard it is to get a job with an Alec Baldwin? Like, you're filming Alec Baldwin, and then to resign from that, that's a big deal, right? So they resigned and walked off on October 20, the day before this poor lady died. And then on October 21, the producers had a new camera crew. What does that tell you? 3 accidental firings. They walk off because of safety concerns. And then, you know, on October 21, they had to get a new crew. That day, the day of when Alec Baldwin wanted to do all this at lunchtime and rehearse everything, they weren't filming that morning because there's no camera crew and then all this like commotion. So some of the crew members were bored. What did they do? They got some of the guns, they're real guns, and they had live ammunition, and just for fun, to pass the time, they started shooting at like empty beer cans. So they had beer and they were drinking it, and then there was empty beer cans, and then they were shooting at it to pass the time during the filming of this movie, and they were shooting at the beer cans with live ammunition. What do you think? Right? This is unbelievable. And it was turned out later that one of the guns, like they just put it back. They put it back where they found it. And, you know, that one of the guns was that was the one that Alec Baldwin used, you know? So this is all pretty bad, I would say. This, I remember, okay, it must have been in the early 90s. I'm not going to date myself. Early 90s, okay? I remember taking driver's ed. And this story came up because my son, Jude, is 15. So he's like, you know, learning how to drive and everything. And I remember the driver's education guy saying, car accident. There's no such thing as a car accident. It's somebody being stupid that caused a car crash. You know, unless a tree just, you know, somehow just flies up in the air and falls on the freeway, that could be an accident, but that doesn't happen. There's always somebody caused this, you know. I remember him saying that. It makes sense, you know. So somebody getting killed on the movie set, you know, if that guy was here, he'd say, you know, that wasn't an accident. That was the conclusion of a lot of stupid mistakes, right? And so here we go. So they were shooting all of that during that day. Alec Baldwin then goes to the videographer and you know, he wants to rehearse this scene. So he then goes and then he gets the gun from the armorer, from the assistant director, not the armorer. So he gets the gun. The assistant director says, "Oh, this is a cold gun," meaning, you know, the rounds in there are blanks. Okay, so Alec Baldwin believes him and then takes it. Then, and this is funny, like Alec Baldwin stated to the police and to the media, "I've been involved in 40 movies with real guns, and I have real guns. I know, I'm an expert in it," you know? And he's supposed to know that anytime you have a gun, you have to assume it's like the gun safety, and this is a thing that all actors know, or they're supposed to know, is that you never point it at somebody, even if it's blank, even if it's, you know, you don't do that. And the other thing you don't do is you don't pull the trigger, you know, so you don't aim it at somebody and you don't pull the trigger, and you have to assume it's loaded, okay, with real ammunition. He violated all of that. He pointed it at, because they wanted to do the scene where like the gun is going to end up like come even at the camera. I feel weird pointing a fake gun at the camera, you know, like my hand, you know? So anyway, so he wants to point it at the camera because that's how they're gonna do the scene. But the camera, you know, it's got the videographer behind it, right? So he points it directly at her and then he pulls the trigger, you know, thinking a blank is gonna come out, but then a live bullet came out and killed the poor girl. So here I would say that, what do you think? He's being cautious and careful or negligent? Negligent. Zeke, you concur? Yeah, it sounds pretty bad. Okay. Wait, are you flipping me off or Alec Baldwin? Oh, he's flipping off Alec Baldwin, not me. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm just joking. He wasn't flipping me off. Okay, so yeah, he ends up shooting her. He says later that, well, I had to point it right at the camera because that's how we wanted to do the scene. And again, I didn't know that it was not loaded. There is a considerable amount of disagreement here about the pulling the trigger. Okay, so this is something that in Alec Baldwin's case, this is going to be a big deal about this whole pulling the trigger deal. He says that he never, so in the gun, you know, in the revolver, there's the trigger that's in the loop, and then there's the thing in the back, the hammer, it's called. You have to put that guy down, the hammer, and then you pull the trigger. That's the only way to shoot. You can't, this particular gun, you can't shoot it unless the hammer is down and you pull the trigger. He says that there must have been a malfunction because all he did was pull back the hammer, and when he pulled back the hammer, then the gun discharged. That is a cause of big dispute, okay? Because that's, if he did pull the trigger, that's a bigger kind of evidence of him being negligent. What happened then is the police, you know, during when they were investigating everything, they took this particular gun, right? And then ultimately they sent it to the FBI for testing. So the FBI takes it to, what is it called? Quantico? Am I pronouncing it right? You know, and on the East Coast. So the FBI tests this gun and they they tested it. They had their firearms expert testing it, and they concluded that this particular gun was not malfunctioning and that there was a 0% chance. It's physically impossible for that gun to fire a bullet without pulling the trigger. All right. So who do you believe, FBI or Alec Baldwin? All right. But I love lawyers, right? We got to complicate everything. Because the FBI tested the gun, they kept firing it, they kept shooting with it. They were doing tests with it. And then at some point after doing that for so many times, then the gun had a problem. Like they destroyed the gun, basically. It's easy to fix, but it would be useless if they fix it, because if they fix it, then we don't know how it was the day Alec Baldwin had it. You know what I'm saying? So now the gun can no longer be tested or relied upon. So if Alec Baldwin wants his own firearms expert, the evidence has been destroyed. Are you with me? So that's going to be a big dispute in evidence. Alec Baldwin's lawyers will file what we call a motion in limine saying, well, we cannot have that FBI report admitted into evidence because we never had an opportunity to have our firearms expert take a look at the gun and, test the gun. That would be a good argument, right? I think that my gut feeling would be that the court will allow the FBI evidence because it is the freaking FBI. If it was Joe Samo's testing company, right, it probably wouldn't be allowed. But because it's the FBI, and when you test weapons, you test it, right? And then it could then have an issue after you're testing it so rigorously. So there's no other way to do it. So my gut feeling is that then they will allow that evidence to come in. And there's another beautiful thing, not beautiful, but the police, they're very, very thorough. This is one of my favorite things here. The police, in some of their documents, this particular document, statement of probable cause when they wanted the search warrants, photo and video evidence from inside the church on the day of the shooting show some of the rehearsal up to and including the moments before the shooting. It just happened they were filming, but at the actual shooting, they weren't filming through the camera. They were just looking at it. The photos and videos of that same day depict Alec Baldwin prior to the shooting, practicing drawing and pointing the weapon. The photos and videos clearly show Alec Baldwin multiple times with his finger inside of the trigger guard loop and on the trigger while manipulating the hammer and while drawing, pointing, and holstering the rifle. So what they're saying is, because Alec Baldwin said, I never pulled the trigger. My finger wasn't even on the trigger. So I didn't even accidentally pull it, right? But all of the video and photos that they have show him with the gun, like practicing with his finger on the trigger. You with me? Very good evidence, right? You see what I'm saying? I mean, evidence is funny. I remember a law professor used to always say, every piece of evidence, it's like a brick, you know? I think I said this before in another podcast. It's like a brick. So one piece of evidence by itself won't make or break a case, but it's a brick. So all of these different bricks that the prosecutor has can build the case. All right. So I think that evidence of everything that day, plus the FBI saying that it's impossible for this gun to fire without pulling the trigger, I think the jury will get all that evidence. And I think if they're reasonable, they will conclude that he pulled the trigger. Okay, but that's not the whole case, right? I mean, he pulls the trigger, but it's part of the filming, but again, all of the stuff about the previous discharges during that day, during the shooting of this film, and the camera crew walking out and all of that, hiring a bad armorer, this is all part of the building up the case. Now, the armorer, there is a rule in their industry that they have to do a training session with anyone handling a weapon. So Alec Baldwin, when she wanted to do a little training session with him, he just blew it off. It's supposed to be like all these things, but because he's already a gun expert, he just blew it off. And even while she was like explaining things to the crew, like he was on his cell phone or something, like communicating with people. So I don't think that was very careful, but it's also not careful of him and the armorer. The armorer should have then said, no, I'm not going to let him take any weapons. Although it's hard for her to do that because it's Alec Baldwin. You see what I'm saying? So yeah. So this is all the kind of, I'm going through things that are supposed to kind of occur. The next order of business is apparently when you give someone a gun, you're saying it's a cold gun, which is what the assistant said. There's one other thing he was supposed to have done. And that is if somebody's going to shoot a blank, because a blank could injure somebody and it's a loud sound, so people could get freaked out. You have to announce to everybody that there's going to be a shot fired. You could say by shot going to be fired, or you could say, fire in the hole. Like, so everyone is alerted. Okay, we're going to hear a blast, right? That was never done either. So that was just kind of another example of something that was screwed up. Okay. A few, now what happened? So the day, October 21, that's the day he fired the gun and it killed this poor girl. Now that was over 2 years ago. It's a long time, right? Over 2 years ago. So what happened since then is the police took about a year or so to gather all this evidence. Then they charged 3 people. They charged Alec Baldwin, they charged the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez, and they charged that assistant director, David Halls. David Halls pleaded guilty to manslaughter, which is pretty bad, right? So he pleaded guilty, meaning that he said, I admit that I was careless, and I admit that I was reckless, and I admit that my recklessness caused this lady's death. Do you want to know the sentence that he got? You want to know? You want to know? All right. 0 days of jail and a $500 fine. Thank you very much, prosecutors. What the heck, right? But there was one caveat. Guess what that is? He's supposed to, let me read this the way it said. The defendant, David Halls, agrees that he will testify truthfully in all hearings, trials, or settings involving any other defendants. So he was what we like to, the police call, he was going to be an informant. Like he was going to tell everything. He was going to, what do the co-defendants call him? Yeah, the rat. He was a rat. So that's why he got 0 jail time. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. Pretty good deal that his lawyers got, right? Yeah, even my 10-year-old daughter in her class, she asked me, she goes, well, what if a defense lawyer, what if she knows the person is guilty? And I said, well, even if the person's guilty, there's ways you could maneuver this and that, like the different, like sentencing. So I would say that his lawyer did a good job, right? So he got 0 jail time. He got a $500 fine. He has to pick up trash for a few hours, you know, but gosh darn it. That was a pretty low sentence, but he's a rat. Rats get, you know, that sentence. So it looks like they're really going after Alec Baldwin and the armorer. Okay, so I said there's 3 people charged, right? That was the fate of one of them. Alec Baldwin was charged in January 2023. Then the charges were dropped, and then they were brought back up. And again, the fact that he got charged a second time does not violate the double jeopardy provision in the 8th Amendment, because when the charges were dismissed originally, there was no verdict. The only time double jeopardy applies is if a prosecutor tries the case and the defendant is found not guilty. The prosecutor cannot recharge that case. You know, if it's a state prosecutor, though, a federal prosecutor can, but not the state prosecutor. Okay, so there's no double jeopardy issue. So Alec Baldwin just got new charges on January 2024. Hannah Gutierrez, her trial is supposed to start in February of 2024 or March of 2024. What do you think? You think she's guilty of manslaughter? I think so. I think she's gonna have a tough case. You know, her fine might be more than $500. It might be like 2,000 or something. No, I'm just joking. It might be jail time. I mean, she's fighting it very aggressively. Some of the issues I love rules of evidence. And one of the disputes in her case, she filed what's called a motion in limine. Apparently, a year before this incident, she had a boyfriend who died in a motorcycle accident. And it was pretty sad because they were at a party and her boyfriend asked for the keys to her motorcycle. And even though he was drunk, she gave him the keys to her motorcycle. And then he rode the motorcycle drunk, crashed, and died. She's, what do you think? Is that relevant to this case? No, I don't think so either. So she filed a motion, but the prosecutor, okay, let me take it one step at a time. So in her case, you know, that's a rule of evidence. You know, obviously she doesn't want the evidence to come in, and she disputes it. She says that, no, it wasn't, I didn't give him the keys. He either had the keys or he started the motorcycle, like it was a kickstart motorcycle. You don't necessarily have the keys, you know, and so she disputes that. But in the police report of that case, you know, she had some statements that may have been inconsistent that she gave to the police, and that at one point she said it was like that guy wasn't her boyfriend, but he was. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, long story short, what the prosecutor agreed to about that is that if there is a trial, they won't bring up any of that information unless she testifies in her own case. And if she testifies, maybe they'll bring, or they want to bring that case up only to the extent that she lies to authorities. You know what I'm saying? It's called the credibility, you know, impeaching her credibility. So they may bring that up, you know, but a long shot. But it was an interesting kind of issue. Okay, so for Alec Baldwin, so his case just started. He will be, obviously, like I said, fighting issues about like the gun, and he's going to ask for the whole case to be dismissed because they can't test the gun. He'll ask for, you know, the case to be dismissed because of they already filed charges and they dropped it. That's not a good argument, but, you know, they'll file it anyway. And then ultimately, I think, I think he's going to plead guilty to something. I think he's going to strike some sort of deal, and then he'll come out and say, I pleaded guilty because there was some honest mistakes I made, and I don't want the family of this poor, the lady that died, her kids, her husband, you know, whatever. I don't want them to suffer. So I wanted this to end. I mean, there's a way he could save face. You know, I don't know. You want to make a gentleman's bet? You think he'll plead guilty, or you agree with me? Yeah, I have a bet with a lawyer, Stephen L. So I'm going to call him for now. He said that this guy will not be found guilty. And he was he said, I won the bet when the charges were dropped. But I said, it's not over yet.
Nothing is over. Nothing.
You know, and then the new charges were filed and all that jazz. So we'll see how it happens. I'd love to hear what you think. But there was one funny term that I learned while I was investigating all of this. Okay, this is a funny term. When they dropped the charges on the first case, the prosecutor filed this motion when they dropped the charges. It was called nolle prosequi. What the heck, right? Remember I said lawyers love Latin? Okay, whenever we could use Latin terms in law, like lawyers just dig. I never heard this one. So what it means, nolle prosequi, means in Latin, we will not bring the prosecution's case, right? So they could have just said motion to dismiss, but that sounds a lot cooler, doesn't it? You know, and if you see, you can kind of see the derivative there. Nolle, we're not going to, the no, and prosecute, I guess that's the derivative of the word prosecution. I would love to hear what you think and what your predictions are. See you next week.